Hi class. I hope everyone is safe and healthy. I know you must have experienced lots of different kinds of emotions during this uncertain time. So today we will look at how emotions will influence your life. So, what is emotion? Emotion is the mental state of feeling associated with our evaluation of our experiences. They are pretty important for our decisions. For example, when you meet an alligator, feeling fearful is important for us to fight or flee. So, although those negative emotions, they are not that pleasant, but they are crucial to our survival. So in this chapter, we will talk about different theories of emotion, what is emotion, the nonverbal expression of emotion, happiness and self-esteem, motivation, attraction, love, and hate, the greatest mysteries of them all. Okay, first, theories of emotion. The first theory we will talk about is discrete emotions theory. It proposed that humans experience a small number of distinctive emotions that are rooted in our biology. Here are some evolutionary evidence for this distinctive emotion theory. First, newborn infants can smile and cry, even for blind babies. It's not a result of learning or direct reinforcement, like no one taught them that before. Second, there are similarities between humans and non-human animals. For example, high-pitched sounds are associated with friendly interactions, and low-pitched sounds are associated with hostile interactions. And that's the same for both humans and non-human animals. According to this theory, these basic emotions are evolutionary adaptive. They prepare us to take action. For example, disgust. It helps us avoid potentially harmful things, like rotten food. Anger. It can lead to our teeth and fists becoming clenched, ready to fight. And fear. It can lead to our eyes opening wide, better ability to spot dangers in environment. Additionally, we find that there seem to be universality of emotional expression. By doing a lot of cross-cultural research, including studying cultures with little or no exposure to Western culture. Research suggests there are 7 universal primary emotions that are reliably interpreted across cultures. These are happiness, surprise, sadness, fright, disgust, contempt, and anger. There are a couple more that some researchers argue should be added, including awe, pride, shame, and embarrassment. Interestingly, there are some differences in how easily primary emotions can be recognized. Happiness are most easily recognized, and negative emotions are more difficult to recognize, like disgust, anger, and fear. Primary emotions don't tell the whole story of our feelings. Our brain creates an enormous array of secondary emotions from a small number of these primary emotions. For example, hatred is a mix of anger and disgust. Now let's talk about some of the ways that cultures differ in their emotional expression. Different cultures are said to have different display rules, which are cross-cultural guidelines for how and when to express emotions. So for instance, some cultures greet each other with a kiss or two on the cheek. Others keep their distance or shake hands. Some cultures are a bit more open about allowing boys to cry than others. The important point here is that culture isn't influencing the experience of emotion itself. It's only influencing the expression of that emotion. According to discrete emotion theory, these primary emotions have distinctive patterns of physiological responding. In other words, we have different physiological reactions associated with making certain faces. So, for example, when we make an angry or fearful face, physiologically, we are also experiencing more rapid heart rate. Research suggests that certain emotions are mostly limited to activating one particular brain region. Fear is associated with activation of the amygdala, and disgust is associated with activation of a particular region within the limbic system, known as the insular region. However, trying to distinguish emotions based on physiology alone isn't always successful. For example, research shows, interestingly, that happiness and sadness don't appear all that distinct in terms of their patterns of brain activation. And to be sure, even though certain emotions are mostly limited to certain areas of the brain, there are multiple brain regions that are active at any given time for all emotions. It's also the case that we can fake emotions, although perhaps not perfectly. If you want to participate in some real emotion research, you can follow this link on your own time to see if you can spot fake smiles from real smiles. But what is a real smile? In the emotions research world, a real genuine smile is a smile that reaches your eyes. Okay, let's see if we can detect real and fake smiles. Okay, let's look at these 5 pictures for 5 seconds. And let's think whether they are real smile or fake smile. Okay, how about the first one? The first one is a genuine smile. The second one is a fake smile. The third one, also fake. Fourth one, also fake. And the last one is a genuine smile. So, after talking about the discrete emotion theory, now we will talk about another school of thoughts, the cognitive theories of emotion. They propose that emotions are products of thinking, of interpretation. So, for discrete emotion theory, they argue that our emotion reactions to stimuli comes before our interpretation of them. They are innately triggered automatically. However, the advocates of the cognitive theories of emotion disagree. The cognitive theory of emotions, they believe that emotions are products of thinking. In other words, we think first and feel later. How would this work? Well, it's basically saying that how we interpret stimuli leads to how we feel about that stimuli. If we are preparing for a big test, we can either see it as a terrifying potential failure, or we can see it as an opportunity to grow and learn. How we emotionally feel about that test depends on how we interpret the big test. We will feel nervous and bad if we focus on the potential to fail, but we will feel perhaps excited and motivated if we focus on the potential to learn. According to these cognitive theories, there are not any discrete emotions. Instead, there are as many emotions as kinds of thoughts, and the boundaries across emotions are fuzzy. Okay, so the first theory in this school of thoughts is called James Lange theory. It proposed that emotions result from our interpretations of our bodily reactions to stimuli. What does it mean? It's not that intuitive. So, for example, you see a car coming, your heart starts to pounding really fast, and you feel this arousal. And then, consciously or unconsciously, you interpret this bodily reaction. And then you conclude that, oh, I feel really fearful now. And here is another example. So you see a dog growling, and you feel the heart beating fast, you're breathing hard, then you have a perception of your bodily change, your physiological change, and then you conclude that, okay, I'm afraid. You identified your emotion in the end. One supporting evidence of this theory is that people with injuries high in their spinal cord lose their bodily sensations and report less emotion like fear and anger because they don't have the bodily sensations. They cannot interpret those sensations. Therefore, they have less emotions. Does it make sense? Okay. Second theory in this school of thoughts is called the Cannon-Bard theory of emotion. It proposed that an emotion-invoking event leads spontaneously to an emotion and to bodily reactions. So these two things happen at the same time. When you see a bear, your thalamus will give instructions at the same time to autonomic arousal, your bodily change, and also an emotion arousal. Cannon-Bard theory of emotion, they disagree with the James Lange theory because they believe that physiological changes occur slowly and we are not aware of many of our bodily reactions. For example, we never feel the stomach contractions. They argue that the thalamus triggers emotion and bodily reactions at the same time, but later researchers shows that other parts of the brain, like amygdala, plays key roles. If you guys remember amygdala, that's the brain part that in charge of the emotion fear. Okay, the last theory in this school of thoughts is the two-factor theory. It proposed that emotions are produced by an undifferentiated state of arousal, along with an explanation of that arousal. What does it mean? So, after encountering an event, we experience a state of alertness that is undifferentiated. In other words, the state of alertness, arousal, is the same across all emotions. At this point, we haven't yet determined the valence or specificity of that arousal. We just are alert or on edge. It's only after we spend some cognitive effort, however brief or automatic, thinking about what the source of the arousal is that we are able to label that feeling of arousal with an emotion. This whole process is very rapid and occurs pretty much without conscious awareness. Let's see an example. Okay, unfortunately, you see a bear again. You experience arousal and try to figure out the source of the arousal. Maybe it has something to do with the bear. After you figured out the source of the arousal, you experience the feeling, oh, when I see a bear, I feel fearful. This all seems very well and good, but this theory has its own drawbacks. One, the evidence is a bit mixed. Some support, some not. Two, we know that emotions can occur in the absence of physiological arousal. So this raises some questions. But they have done a very interesting experiment. This experiment is really famous. It's called the suspension bridge effect. So they hired a really attractive female research assistant, and she approached male undergraduates and gave them her phone number, either on a study bridge or a swaying bridge. It turns out men were twice as likely to call her later if they met her on a swaying bridge. Between these two conditions, study bridge and swaying bridge, all these men met the same girl. So, why is that? It's because the men on the swaying bridge, they misattribute the arousal to romantic emotions. They probably think, oh, I feel aroused, probably because I'm attracted to her. You can check out this experiment in the video below. So we have talked about these four theories: discrete emotion theory, James Lange theory, Cannon-Bard theory, and two-factor theory. Which theory is correct? As is often the case in psychology, there is some truth to several explanations. Discrete emotion theory is probably correct that our emotional reactions are shaped in part by nature selection, and that these reactions serve critical adaptive functions. And the James Lange theory are probably correct in assuming that our inferences concerning our bodily reactions can influence our emotional states. Finally, the two-factor theory may be right that physiological arousal plays a key role in the intensity of our emotional experiences, although it's unlikely that all emotions require such arousal. Some of the influences on our emotions are not as obvious as seeing a bear. There are also unconscious influences on emotion, variables outside our awareness that can affect our feelings and produce reflective emotional reactions. One example is subliminal perception. If we flash negative words like anger, mad, so quickly that participants don't report seeing it, it can still cause decline in mood. So, although you cannot consciously experience that stimuli, it can still have an effect on your emotion. Another example of unconscious influence is called mere exposure effect. It means repeated exposure to something makes us more likely to feel favorably towards it. In other words, the more we see it, the more we like it, even in the absence of any original valence. If we can feel totally neutral towards something, or maybe even a bit negatively, but if we are exposed to it repetitively, we tend to like it more. It can be true for people. All else being equal, we will like a person more the more we see them. Good opportunity to use Dick's pickup line. As a psychology major, my idea of a pickup line is, has the mere exposure effect kicked in yet, or do I need to walk by again? So no one knows why mere exposure effects occur. These effects may reflect habituation, a primary form of learning. The more frequently we encounter a stimulus without anything bad happening, the more comfortable we feel in its presence. Alternatively, we may prefer things we find easier to process. The more often we experience something, the less effort it typically takes to comprehend it. In turn, the less effort something takes, the more we tend to like it, just as we generally prefer books that are easy to read over those are hard to read. Another example of unconscious emotional influence is facial feedback hypothesis. You have probably heard the phrase, turn that frown upside down. Seems kind of silly, right? If I merely smile, how is that going to change my mood in any way? Well, some research suggests that changing expression on your face causes you to experience that emotion. For instance, in the original classic study, participants held a pen with their teeth, which inducing smiling, or with their lips, which inducing frowning. They then did a variety of things, rating how funny a cartoon was. People who were induced to smile thought the cartoons were funnier. So, facial feedback hypothesis is basically saying that there are blood vessels in the face that feedback temperature information into the brain, which alters how we experience emotions. So, in other words, our physiology is influencing our mood. It may be due to classical conditioning, like we associate smile with happiness. But the problem with this hypothesis is that there are some failures to replicate this study. So these are not very robust findings. Okay, next part, we will talk about nonverbal expression of emotion. Much of our emotion expression is nonverbal. We use cues other than words to express our emotions. The tone of our voice, the look in our face, how we carry ourselves, what we are doing with our hands. These are all aspects of conveying emotion. This is why trying to convey emotion via email or text is difficult. We are robbed of much of our emotional language. So if I email you, we need to talk after class. This probably sent you into a panic. because we don't know the face-to-face interaction to confirm or disconfirm how serious the situation may be. The nonverbal expression of emotion is deeply ingrained. Much of our nonverbal emotion cues are expressed without conscious awareness. So, for instance, there is research that shows if we like someone, we are likely to sit a bit closer to them, but we are not necessarily aware what we are doing. The opposite is also true. We sit further from someone we dislike and have some sort of implicit bias against. Another example, when we are anxious, we tend to touch our face, hair, etc. Or we may cross our arms to kind of provide some barrier and protection. Sometimes, despite our best efforts, we are unable to conceal our nonverbal emotional expressions. We don't always want someone to know we dislike them or we are annoyed with them, but our bodies seem to have a mind of their own. It's known as a nonverbal leakage. We all lie. Dairy studies suggest that college students tell on average about 2 lies per day. And how good we are to detect lies. It turns out the verbal content gives us more information than nonverbal contents, despite common wisdom suggesting otherwise. Even the people that are supposed to be very best at detecting lies are not able to do so that much above chance. They do a bit better, like the federal officers, sheriffs, um, deception interested clinical psychologists, which suggest that practice and training does help. But it's actually the case that there is pretty much no correlation between how confident we are in our ability to detect lies and how accurate we actually are in detecting lies. How about machines like a polygraph? They assume a Pinocchio response. In other words, lie detectors assume that there should be a perfect physiological or behavioral indicator of underlying that is as unmistakable as Pinocchio's growing nose. Polygraphs measure blood pressure, respiration, and skin conductance, like sweating, with the idea that lying will produce anxiety, and the anxiety has these physiological markers. Polygraph tests are really no better than humans. In fact, in some ways, they may be worse because we assume them to be much better than they are. Polygraphs may perform slightly above chance at detecting lies, but they have a high false positive rate. That is, they incorrectly label innocent people as liars up to 40% of the time, probably because the whole process of undergoing a polygraph is a bit anxiety-provoking. Therefore, the polygraph test is biased against the innocent, and as a result, is actually inadmissible as a form of evidence in most courts of law. In short, polygraph is an arousal detector rather than a lie detector. Okay, let's talk about another method of lie detection, which is called guilty knowledge test. It assesses if the suspect has information that only the criminal would know. It asks suspects multiple choice questions where only one option is correct. For example, a question like, which is the following objects were at the crime scene? It assumes that suspect is guilty if they show strong physiological response to that correct information. However, this method has a high rate of false negatives. It makes guilty people deemed innocent. It probably because that criminals sometimes forgot what was at the crime scene. So in this class, we talk about theories of emotion. Remember these 4 theories. And we also talk about nonverbal expression of emotion. In the next class, we will talk about self-esteem, happiness, motivation, and attraction, love, and hate.